video is one part of a basic training package for new service technicians working in structural pest control. The National Pest Control Association, or NPCA, represents thousands of pest control companies around the country and around the world. As part of its service to member companies, NPCA develops educational programs such as this one. You should also have the workbook Basic Training for New Structural Pest Control Service Technicians, and you may have other reference books to help you in your new job. We'd like to welcome you to the structural pest control industry. You are now a protector of health and property and a guardian of the environment. You will be managing pests in homes, restaurants, hospitals, schools, industry, and just about every other site imaginable. Your job, service technician, is the single most important job in the pest control industry. No one, not your immediate supervisor, not your company's president, nor the president of the National Pest Control Association, is more directly responsible for protecting people and property from household and structural pests than you are. But in your work, you will use pesticides, which are potentially hazardous. If used improperly, they can threaten human health and damage the environment. Becoming a service technician is not a responsibility you should take lightly. You have an obligation to work safely, to work carefully, and to protect your customers, the public, the environment, and yourself. Pest control safety begins from the moment you enter a job site. Before you apply a pesticide or set a trap, you need to know what problems you face. First, you inspect and analyze. As you inspect, you identify and locate pests. Estimate the extent of the problem. Check for conditions that attract pests and contribute to pest problems, and decide what non-chemical methods are appropriate. You also need to locate and identify sensitive sites, areas with special safety concerns that require you to take extra precautions when doing pest control. For example, if there is a baby in the house, you would avoid using pesticides in the baby's room or anywhere else where there could be a risk of exposure. Infants are at special risk from pesticides. Likewise, during your inspection, you need to find out if there are any people with asthma or who are ill, since illness often means increased risk from pesticide exposure. You need to check for any children, particularly young children, or any pregnant women, or any pets, or any other situations which will require you to take special precautions or limit your actions to non-chemical methods of control. A pesticide is a two-edged sword. For all the benefits, there can also be risks. Risks to human health, risks to pets and other animals, risks to the environment. Like the antibiotic that your doctor prescribes for an infection, but which can be dangerous if used improperly, a pesticide is a powerful tool in the hands of a qualified, careful technician. But it can also be dangerous when used improperly. Before a pesticide can make someone sick, it must enter the body. This can happen in three ways: by breathing the vapors, called inhalation exposure; by eating or drinking a pesticide, called oral exposure; or by direct contact through the skin or eyes, called dermal exposure. Toxicity is a measure of how poisonous a chemical is. Pesticides vary. They can be slightly toxic, moderately toxic, or highly toxic. But the toxicity of a pesticide doesn't necessarily tell you how hazardous it is. Hazard is the combination of toxicity and exposure. Even a highly toxic pesticide poses little hazard if it stays safely stored in its container. Fred here is faced with minimal hazard while mixing his insecticide while wearing goggles, gloves, and the other protective equipment recommended on the label. Look at Mike, though. He is not properly protected, nor is he paying attention to safe work practices. He is facing real hazards. Without eye protection, the insecticide concentrate could splash back into his eyes. Without gloves, he could, and probably will, spill insecticide on his hands. Fred and Mike are mixing the same pesticide with the same toxicity. What is different is the risk of exposure. The same pesticide poses a far greater hazard to Mike. Your two main sources of information about pesticides are, first, the pesticide label, and second, the Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS. Every pesticide product has its own unique label. No single document is more important in your job. A label is a legal document that explains precisely what is inside a pesticide container. It spells out how to use the pesticide, how to store it, how to dispose of the container, what to do if there is an accident, what safety equipment to wear, and much, much more. You should carefully read the label of each pesticide product you use and reread that label every time you use it. Don't depend on your memory. Labels are complicated documents and are often changed by the product manufacturer. Even pesticide experts have to read and reread labels to be sure of their information. You shouldn't do any less. The directions for use may require you to use particular application equipment, or apply the material in a certain way, or wear a certain piece of protective equipment. Such instructions are legal requirements, not mere suggestions. It is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. A Material Safety Data Sheet, called an MSDS for short, is a quick guide to the potential hazards of a pesticide. Although it has some of the same information you can find on a pesticide label, it provides more detail on ingredients, potential hazards, and safety precautions. Employers are required to make the MSDS available to every employee using a pesticide. You should review the MSDSs for the pesticides you use to become familiar with their hazards and the safety recommendations for their use. You can also use an MSDS to answer any technical questions you or your customer may have about a particular product. Since you will use pesticides in your work, probably every day, and since you will, on occasion, mix pesticide concentrates, you will face a greater risk of pesticide exposure than do your customers, for example, or the general public. A homeowner who misuses an over-the-counter pesticide once will probably suffer no ill effects. But if you continually expose yourself day after day to small amounts of pesticide through sloppy work habits, you can slowly become overexposed and make yourself quite ill. So be sure to follow these guidelines whenever working with pesticides. Never smoke, eat, or drink while handling pesticides. Avoid inhaling spray or dust, and wear protective clothing, goggles, or respirators if required by the label, as well as whenever you feel it might be necessary. Wash hands and face with soap and water immediately after handling pesticides. Take a bath or shower and put on clean clothes at the end of each workday. Avoid getting sprays or dust on your skin or your clothes. If you spill pesticide on yourself, remove your contaminated clothing and wash your skin immediately with soap and water. If symptoms of illness occur during or shortly after using a pesticide, call your supervisor or a physician immediately. Learn to recognize the common symptoms of pesticide poisoning. They range from headache and dizziness in cases of mild poisoning, through uncontrollable muscle twitches and unconsciousness after a severe poisoning. Check your reference materials for a complete description of symptoms and become familiar with them. Check the pesticide label to see if it gives first aid instructions. Follow those instructions and then get medical help. Protective equipment protects you from the potential hazards you face in your daily work. The equipment required will depend on the pesticides you use and the types of accounts you service. It will include clothing such as gloves, boots, coveralls, and apron, and equipment such as goggles, face shield, ear protector, and respirator. Gloves are very important to protect your hands from spills, but there are many to choose from. The MSDS will often specify which gloves are best for a particular product. Sometimes the label will too. When you are not sure which to use chemical-resistant gloves made from butyl, nitrile, foil laminate, or Viton. Your eyes are particularly sensitive to pesticides and the solvents in them. Wear goggles or a face shield whenever the label has an eye warning statement requiring you to do so, or whenever you are mixing a liquid concentrate, or whenever you're working in a pesticide mist or with a dust. Respirators protect you from inhaling toxic chemicals. There are various kinds. The label will tell you when a respirator must, by law, be worn and what type is required. A respirator is especially important when mixing concentrates, when using highly toxic pesticides, or when working in a poorly ventilated area. Federal law requires that you inspect your respirator before and after each use. Check the facepiece for cracks, dents, holes, other evidence of damage. Check the head straps for cracking, loss of elasticity, or broken buckles. Remove the cover of the exhalation valve and check for debris or hairs under the valve seat, and look for cracks and tears. Check the filter after every few hours of use, and replace it if it becomes dirty or hard to breathe through. Cartridges should be changed as specified by the manufacturer, or after 8 hours of use, or any time you begin smelling odors through the mask. Store your respirator in a plastic bag in a dark, clean, and dry location, away from pesticides. Respirator cleanliness is a safety issue. Pesticide residues can build up on outside surfaces and eventually contaminate the interior parts of the respirator. At the end of the day, follow the manufacturer's instructions for washing down the device. Usually, this involves removing the cartridges and filters, washing the respirator with soapy water, rinsing it with fresh water, and drying it with a clean cloth. When you first put on your mask, make sure it is adjusted properly. Cover the exhalation valve in the center of the mask with the palm of your hand and exhale gently. The facepiece should bulge slightly, and you should feel a positive pressure. This test is called the positive pressure test. If air escapes, readjust the straps until you achieve a proper fit. If you can't make your respirator fit properly, contact your supervisor to get a different model or size. Do not use a respirator that does not seal properly. Report any problem to your supervisor immediately. Highly concentrated emulsions, wettable powders, soluble powders, and the like must be mixed with a liquid, usually water, before you apply them. Concentrates may be 20 or 50 or 100 times as toxic as the final mixture, and transferring concentrate from container to spray tank isn't always easy. One of your toughest jobs as a technician will be pouring and mixing these concentrated pesticides and doing it safely. Wear safety equipment as required, and whenever possible, mix your pesticides outside or in an unoccupied area. Your job will be to protect your customers from pests, but you must be sure you do not put people and the environment at risk by your actions, particularly when you use pesticides. When you face a pest problem, you should first decide whether it is necessary to use a pesticide at all. Often, non-chemical methods of control are the best choice. When you decide that a pesticide application is necessary, take care and choose the product and type of application that fits the situation. There are many factors to consider, including toxicity, hazard, volatility, and type of formulation. In rooms where people are living or working, you should choose a product that poses low hazard to people. This cockroach bait, for example, which is only slightly toxic, does not give off vapors and is applied inside cracks and crevices and not where people can contact it. You will be able to use more volatile and more toxic materials in unoccupied locations where there is little risk of exposure. If you decide that you need to use a more volatile or higher hazard product in an occupied area, first have everyone leave the area. Then do your treatment. Check the label and advise people on how long to wait before re-entering the treated area. Rodenticides kill rats, mice, and other rodents. They are poisons. Children, pets, wildlife, and domestic animals must be protected whenever you use rodenticides. All rodenticides have warnings on the label telling applicators to place bait in locations not accessible to children, pets, wildlife, and domestic animals, or in tamper-resistant bait stations. Could a guard dog at a warehouse eat the bait block you placed under the loading dock? Could a child reach under the refrigerator and grab the bait place pack you hid there? If so, you must change your bait placement or place the bait inside a tamper-resistant bait station. A tamper-resistant bait station is designed so that a child or a pet cannot get at the bait inside, but a rodent can. The stations are generally made of metal or heavy plastic with lockable covers and interior baffles. They are designed to be secured to the ground, wall, or floor. A bait tray is not a tamper-resistant bait station. In your work, be careful to keep your pesticides and supplies secure. Both thieves and curious children can come to harm from stolen pesticides, and you can be held legally responsible if you have been careless. Always roll up the windows and lock an unattended vehicle and any toolboxes. Never leave your equipment and materials unguarded and out in the open. And finally, never leave your professional pesticides with customers for them to apply themselves. It is illegal. Speaking of security, all pesticide containers in your vehicle should be secure, supported, and protected so that they cannot roll or bounce around, break, or spill during normal travel. We have a far greater appreciation today of just how sensitive the natural environment is to the effects of chemicals, such as a pesticide. A small amount of pesticide concentrate in the wrong place can cause serious environmental damage. This is why, for example, we always use a backflow preventer when filling large spray tanks, such as termite rigs. The backflow preventer keeps the pesticide in the tank from siphoning back into the water supply, contaminating it. Environmental safety is also why excess pesticide is never disposed of by pouring into toilets or sewers or creeks or storm drains, which are federal crimes and can get you jail time. For disposal, like everything else you do with a pesticide, you follow the instructions on the pesticide label. If you are careless for one moment, you may end up with a broken pesticide container, a pesticide spill, and possible environmental contamination and threat to public health. If a spill happens, act quickly to minimize problems. For a small, minor spill during application or mixing, clean it up with a rag or absorbent material, and then follow up with some soapy water. Do not dispose of the rags or absorbents at the job site. Put them in a plastic bag and take them back to your office for disposal. If you have a larger spill, your first job is to protect the health of the people in the area, including yourself. Put on any protective clothing necessary. Contain the spill with rags, dirt, absorbents, or whatever the situation calls for. Keep people away from the contaminated area. Keep the spilled material from running off into creeks, storm drains, sewers, and any environmentally sensitive areas. Contact your office for further instructions. If the spill is severe or threatens the environment or human health, follow your company's spill response program. The most important information in reporting a spill is what pesticide is involved, how much is spilled, and where is the spill. This concludes the video Safety and Pest Control, a guide for new structural pest control service technicians. You should also be reviewing the other training materials you were given. Good luck in the pest control industry, and we hope you have a rewarding and safe career protecting the health and property of the nation.